If you were like most buyers or sellers here in Ocean City, you've probably stopped paying attention to the real estate market. We've got the holidays coming up. It's not something that most people are currently thinking about, but that is when deal season happens. So in today's video, I want to walk you through what has happened so far in November from a statistical standpoint, look at the charts so we can predict what is coming. And I have a couple of things I want to share with you towards the end of the video, properties in particular that I think are well worth looking at. So let's dive right in. First and foremost, we had our first reversal from a mortgage rate standpoint. And what I mean by that is not that they are going to permanently start to decrease from now. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, but they've dropped a full 0.5% from 8% to 7.5% just over the course of the last few weeks. There are a lot of reasons why that happened. I'm not going to dive into today, because all you probably care about is that the rates have come down. Now, beyond that, there's a note here that I want to share with you. A local lender in particular reached out the other day. They have a new investor, and this is a legitimate bona fide lender here, not a mom and pop situation. They have somebody who is looking to lend money at 7%. They're looking for a couple deals, so there's an opportunity here for you to win where you may otherwise be stuck on the fence, and especially this particular program and platform is going to allow for potentially a 10% down payment. Normally, second home wise, you're 20% down minimum, and even at 10%, it's still 7%. As a mortgage rate, it does not increase. So if you're curious about that, reach out to me. I'd be happy to share with you the dirty details. So inventory wise, we're flat. Now, at the end of October, we were up at 248. We fell off a cliff a little bit with properties that expired that came off the market. We're right back up to where we started. And I do not anticipate necessarily that we're going to stay here. If history is any teacher for us, we should start to see things slowly pick up. I expect that we will crack 250 pretty comfortably by the end of this month. I certainly could be wrong. And I'll dive into why here in a second. But inventory is going to be something very, very critical to watch. Days on market is still very stable, and price-wise, so the rate of growth in condos last month, we were 14% year over year. Now we're 12% year over year, is slowing down, but they are still increasing slowly, but they're still increasing. And single family homes last month, we were looking at about a 5% reduction in price from the end of October to the same time last year. Now we're down 3%. So it started creeping up a little bit again. And again, in these charts, I'll explain why and what's happening. So first and foremost here at new listings, and if you want to pause and really scrutinize this, you certainly can. Normally in November, we see a pretty steep drop that then continues into December for new listings coming onto the market. But based on what we've seen for the first half of the month, if we see the same thing over the second half of the month, we're actually going to see a much smaller decrease in new listings than we would have expected otherwise. Now, I don't expect that to happen, right? Again, we are coming up to Thanksgiving. Most people really stop paying attention once that comes. So I do expect the second half to be slower than I'm projecting here. I just don't have enough, data to say that confidently what happens around this time of year compared to the first half of the month. But new listing wise, it's going to be a reduction no matter what compared to where we were in October. And I expect that to again occur next month in December. And look, it's very simple. If more homes are not coming on the market, even if fewer homes are selling, enough are selling to keep inventory still extremely low. And we've gotten so numb to being under 300 homes on the market that once we start approaching 300, it almost feels high. But compared to where we were just a few years ago, pre-COVID, admittedly, where the norm was about 500 homes on the market, we're still half. We're still extraordinarily low by historical standards. So I don't expect things to slow down from a pricing standpoint anytime soon. I don't expect them to go down. And here's another case that I want to explain real quick. So pending sales in November, as you can see here, the blue bars, there's a drop from the prior month every single year over the past 4 years. It's normal. Now, there's a much larger drop from a percentage basis that we're seeing now in 2023 compared to the rest. And there are two reasons why. Number one, in October, we saw a much smaller reduction than we would have expected in the past. And I think we had more people active early in October than we normally would have had otherwise. And that has increased that gap from month to month. But number two, again, this time last year, we had about 15% more inventory than we have right now. So you should expect that that is going to impact the number of homes that go under contract. There's not as much selection out there for buyers. And now as far as December, normally we should expect another reduction. Now, we didn't see that in December 2022. We actually had a small increase in the number of homes that went under contract, but I would expect to be roughly flat, somewhere in the 30 to 35 homes going under contract range at most next month. Closed sales, again, this is a lagging statistic, but again, we're fairly consistent over the past few months in the total number of homes that have closed, really between, I'll say, 50 and 70. Pretty solid, all things considered. Months of inventory, we're still staying under 6, but starting to creep up a little bit. And that's a neutral market. It's a balanced market. That's very much what it feels like, even though it seems like it shouldn't. Now, pricing, I want to hit on this real quick. So we did see a true decline last month, and we've seen that a couple months in a row. We have our first tick back up. Now, what I said in last month's market update video, if you didn't watch it, it's okay. You can find it on my channel, but you don't need to go back and watch that. I'm going to explain it for you right here. So what this is based off of is 12 months of sales history. And once we go into the next month, 12 months ago falls off, or 13 months ago at that point, we lose a month. So I'm able to look backwards and say, hey, what was the median sale price 13 months ago versus what we're going to see likely be the case this month and next month? And based on the data, I expect us to creep up again this month and most likely again next month, unless we see some very low priced single family homes going under contract and scheduled to close in the month of December. What we have on the books now that's set to close before the end of the year would put us in a position where we're going to see not only an increase this month in median price, but again next month. And we're not talking 5-10%. It's going to be very, very minor, but it's still an increase. And like I had mentioned before, what looked like a decline is not really a decline. It's just a balancing of some of the pretty crazy things that had happened primarily in 2022 when money was still very, very cheap. Now, days on market, still very, very stable. Now we div into condos. So again, very flat 3 months in a row, very consistent on our months of inventory. That's despite more inventory coming because there's still a lot that is selling and going off and being purchased. So I don't expect much here. We still haven't cracked 5 months since as long as I've been tracking this. So still very, very much a balanced, slightly tilted towards sellers in terms of leverage. Prices are still going up, very, very small chunks now, but still not heading in the opposite direction. I don't expect that to change based off of what is scheduled to close next month either. Days on market is still flat. So I want to project out here before I dive into, again, a couple of those best buys. Number one that I had talked about in my video last week. If you didn't see that, definitely check it out. The link is down in the description. But there's another one that I walked through earlier this week that I think really needs to be on that list as well. And I'm going to share that with you here. So again, the biggest news is that despite the Federal Reserve not moving their rates, mortgage rates have gone down anyway. And again, I don't want to dive into the dirty details. It's a lot, but it has a lot to do with the bond market, treasuries, and a couple other factors. Short version, mortgage rates are better. How long does that remain the case? I don't know. We've had a few times over the past year where we went to a historic high and then they came back down a little bit, and you would think, hey, we're going to level out, only to then increase and hit a new historic high and repeat the cycle. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I hope not. But what is nearly a miracle at this point is that we have that occurring at the same time where, again, what I call deal season over the next 45 days, we're 15 days into it, is really in full swing. I'm already starting to see, and I can't say specifically property-wise, but I'm starting to see some sellers sweat. There's more motivation on some of them to really try to get their property sold. There's still a lot of nervousness around Israel, around Ukraine, around a lot of things. The windmills are, over and done with for now. So that's relieved some stress on people who are trying to sell. But there's still a lot up in the air. And this is the time of year where people are ready. They don't want to carry the home for much longer if they don't have to. They prefer to be out before the end of the year, whether that's for tax purposes or personal reasons. So we do have another 45 days where I think if you are in this market to buy, it is well worth taking some pokes at some properties. And again, this is the time of year where I work harder than most to try to gain some of that information, to try to sniff out where those possibilities might be. So if you are finding a 7% mortgage rate appealing, and you've had your eye on a property or two or three, or if you're just waiting for the right one, I highly recommend you reach out so that we start the conversation, because one-to-one, I can share things that I can't say in a public setting like this video. But I would be able to walk you through those in detail personally. So rate-wise, again, we don't know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't expect them to come down much more until inflation really starts to get under control, likely 8 to 12 months. I've been pretty firm on that for a while now. Inventory wise, it's normal that we didn't really see a change over the past 2 weeks. Normally, if we go back historically, some years we end up seeing a slight increase as much as 5% over October, sometimes as little as 7% of a decrease. So that's really the window that we were looking at. And we're right in the middle, right? We haven't seen a change. So there's going to be some change in some direction, but it's not going to be significant enough to move the needle in either direction. So what we have is what we have. I would not expect a ton more new inventory by the end of the year. There's still going to be some coming, of course, but I would expect we see probably less than 75 from here through the end of the year. 75 new listed properties, and that's not a lot. So despite inventory not moving, there's more to it. So again, we've had more new listings than we would have expected so far in November. And despite that, and fewer homes going under contract, we still haven't seen the needle move in inventory. So again, it's a very sticky situation. And bottom line is, I think we are really setting up to see a repeat next year of what we've seen this year. And if that's the case, then we really do have a playbook, right? We've seen what's happened. We can learn. And again, now is one of those opportunities to get ahead of the curve if that's really going to be the case. But otherwise, there's one other sweet spot that we could talk about another time. Price-wise, I beat this one senseless at this point. Again, prices are basically where they're going to be. Is there going to be some moderation up or down, a percent here, a couple percentage there? Of course. It's largely going to depend on the property, right? What's the motivation of the seller? How long has it been on the market? What's the condition? All things like that, right? I think we're beyond the window of saying, oh yeah, next year we're going to see a 10% increase, or, oh, we're going to go down 5%, which was my prediction by the end of this year. I anticipated that we would have seen about a 5 to 10% maximum decrease in prices. Now, from a single family standpoint, that's pretty darn close. We did see a decrease so far is what we're looking at, but I was wrong because that projection was based off of inventory. I was very specific that we would have needed to see 300 at least, and ideally 350 homes actively listed on the market at a particular point in time before we see enough pressure that it would bring prices down. We have not cracked 300, and that's not going to happen this year. So as a result, prices have not gone down. I don't anticipate that changing. And quite honestly, if rates do start to come down, again, I only know how to say this one way. A lot of people are sitting on the sidelines right now. People who own property in Ocean City, who have a decent mortgage rate, and making that upgrade is not worth it to them right now because of the financial cost of doing so. If those rates start to come down, yes, that will pull some of those people into the market. So it does help, right? There will be more supply, but guess what? At the same time, there's more demand. And that's a one-for-one situation where you're adding one piece of supply and adding one new buyer in the market. So it's essentially a wash. So I don't anticipate much change at all in the temperature of the market, we'll call it, or the stress that is on the market right now. But again, the next 45 days are crunch time for if you are looking for a value, that's your best bet. And I know if you've been following me for any degree of time, carrying cost matters, right? To a lot of people. You don't want to hold it for 5 to 6 months before you start accruing or collecting rental income if you plan to rent your property out. But that ends up being painful in a couple ways. If this ends up being a repeat of 2023 in the spring of 2024, it's going to be a hyper-competitive environment. That means we'll be where we've been for the past several springs of how comfortable are you waiving some contingencies to be competitive? How comfortable are you stretching your budget? Not fun conversations to have. Trust me, I hate having that. I hate even saying those words. I'm tired of it, just like you are, which is why, to me, focusing now when most people aren't paying attention is the best opportunity. As far as rent collection and helping with those carrying costs, they exist, right? We can't wish them away. But collecting those deposits and structuring them in a way where you are collecting deposits up front can help ease some of that burden. And a few clients that I've been working with have been very hesitant to buy a property for people who do not want to rent, hesitant to buy a property that has any weeks booked coming up this summer, for example. I've seen over the past few years where there's a week or two booked where somebody just can't get their head around there's going to be somebody in my house using my things, which I understand. It's not something that I'm too keen on myself, but they've also missed opportunities by doing that. Property-wise, specific property-wise, they could have had not only a value, but the property that checked all the boxes. We haven't seen one of those since. Or if we have, it's at a premium. It's going to cost them an extra 10-ish%. So I want you to really think these out. And again, I'm here to help you have these conversations, whether it's one-on-one, one-on-two, depending on how many people are making this decision with you. Happy to help you wrap your head around what the possibilities are, because I hate seeing missed chances. More than anything else, I hate seeing missed opportunities for people. So now is a good time to consider making a move, and it's worth a conversation. Last but not least, days on market, still very low. So questions, drop them in the comments or reach out. But I wanted to tell you more about this one property that I think is well worth looking at. If you are open to a 4-bedroom, if you're open to the North End, there's a good one. As a part of my due diligence of not only showing people properties live in person, but also looking through to see what's been sitting out there for a bit and starting to wonder why. There's a property at 811 Penland Place. It is on a smaller lot. It's a 4-bedroom, 3 full bath on a smaller 30-foot wide by 80-foot lot. A normal 4-bedroom in most places is on a 40 by 100. So the square footage is definitely a little bit smaller. But this property has a massive garage where you could park several cars and still have room for your stuff. Has a storage closet in there, has a cabana shower inside. So no outside shower, but it's there for you. And the coolest part of this, too, in my opinion, is that it's still that upper cottage feel that a lot of people seek, specifically in the North End. We tend not to see them too much outside the North End due to flood elevation. And I'll explain more about that in a second. But you do have ocean views off of the front balcony. There's 2 balconies. The master is basically an entire level up top with its own full bath. Sunlight was pouring in when I was there. It was gorgeous. You do have a solid ocean view, right? Now it's 811. It's far back on that beach block. You're not right off the boardwalk by any stretch. But all things considered, I think it's reasonably priced. And I believe that given the days on market, given the situation, I think there may be some motivation there. And if rental income is important to you, and I'll circle back on flooding here in a second, but if rental income is important to you, they have a couple weeks booked already coming up for 2024 at about $6,000 per peak week. Most 4-bedrooms don't necessarily sniff that, whether it's a smaller lot, whether it's a different location. So all in all, I think this could be a very solid income generator for you to cover a lot of those costs. Now, flooding wise, again, why you don't see those upper cottages in most other parts of town has a lot to do with the zoning requirements and height limits based on flood elevation. So in the North End, it is one of the higher points on the island. So that block between Atlantic and Corinthian is a pretty darn high spot. So they're able to get a little more height on their building because they don't have to elevate the living space quite as much, a full 10 to 12 feet in some locations that are further south or closer to the bay. So that's how you're able to get those upper cottages where, again, you have a living area, you have 3 bedrooms on that first floor, just like a pretty standard 3-bed, 2-bath duplex. But then you have a whole 3rd level that is private. And this one was in very good condition. So that's it for today. I hope you found this helpful. And if you learned something, do me a favor and hit the like button. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing down below, because I'm going to continue putting out a whole lot of content. This is all going to be educational based stuff, but I've made a commitment to start doing a little bit more entertaining content as well. So feel free to follow me on Instagram or TikTok as well. All of that information is down in the description. So thanks for hanging out as always, and I'll see you next time.